Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to The Good Tree, the place inspired by the verse in the Quran of a good word that is like a good tree, whose roots are firm and branches reach great heights. You are joined by your hosts, myself Fizza and Noor.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. This series is all about how we can perfect our morals in all our relationships. In today's episode, we will be discussing the relationship with extended family and in-laws.
We are pleased to be joined by our esteemed guest, Dr. Aalimah Masuma Jaffer, who has been serving many years in the community, including chaplaincy, teaching and counselling. And she is currently the resident Aalimah at Hujjat Stanmore. Assalamu alaikum Aalimah Masuma Jaffer, and welcome to The Good Tree.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We wanted to begin this discussion by asking, what is silith al-rahm and who does it apply to?
Okay, so silith al-rahm literally means blood relatives. So it's anyone that you're related to through blood, your parents, your siblings, your uncles and aunts through blood, not through marriage. So it would be, your dad's brothers and sisters and your mom's brothers and sisters and your cousins who again are related through blood. Yeah, so anyone who's related to you through blood would be your rahm. And rahm literally means from the womb. And that's why it's anyone from the same sort of bloodline.
And does that include half siblings or half sisters, half aunties, if they're from one parent?
So as long as they're from one parent and there is a blood connection there, then yes, it would include them.
Okay. So then what are the rights and responsibilities of silat al-rahm, those who fall into that category?
They have a much greater right over us than other Muslims. There is a right of a Muslim over a Muslim, but obviously with silat al-rahm, the concept of silat al-rahm is to keep those family ties, to keep those blood relatives, that connection, that bond between them. And we have many hadiths which talk about the importance of this. And then it's actually, from a fiqh perspective, it's something that is wajib. And we also have many hadiths which talk about the fact that if family ties are broken, so if you do qatl rahm, where you actually cut the family ties, these blood relatives out of your life, it actually brings bala onto your family. So things onto you, So things like it can shorten your lifespan. So if God has given you, say, 40 years of life, by actually breaking these family ties, you can reduce your life yourself through that action. It's a reason for du'as not to be accepted. Your risk is lowered, is decreased through breaking family ties. So there's a lot of negative things that happen to you from breaking these family ties.
And when you say breaking family ties, what does that entail?
It literally means that you don't have any communication with this person, where you've actually not only not communicating, but you've actually made it very obvious that there is some sort of enmity between you. There's some sort of disagreement where now, you're not talking to each other, you don't have any contact with that person, you don't remember them in du'as, you don't have literally anything to do with them at all.
Okay. So what about, relatives who you just haven't asked about? So you haven't actually cut ties with them, but you haven't made an effort either.
So I think here what you've done is you've not done anything haram, but you've not fulfilled your rights on them. There's a specific right on them that they have, and you've not fulfilled it to the best of your ability. So you've actually lost out on the opportunity of getting a lot more blessings. So just like you get bala from breaking family ties, you get a lot of blessings in the more effort that you put into keeping family ties. So if you're inviting people, like families over for dinner, you don't have to do that. You can just phone them and talk to them. But, the more you do, the more effort you put in to keep this family tie, to keep silat al-rahm, the more blessings you receive. So there is more chance of your du'as being accepted, your risk is increased, your lifespan is increased. So there's lots of, it goes the opposite way. So if you haven't kept in touch with them, and again, I suppose a lot of us fall into this category, especially before COVID, because we were so busy being busy that we, literally didn't feel like we had time for our family. And I think one of the positives that's come out of this COVID-19 situation is that it's made us realize that we do have time, and we were choosing not to use that time appropriately. And now we've actually made connections and we've realized how easy it is to make those connections. Hopefully we'll keep them going when life goes back to what was considered as norm, whereas there's nothing as norm really. But even if you don't have time, or if for whatever reason you don't keep in touch with them as such, maybe just remember them in dua. So at least
that's a nice thought, yeah.
So at least on the day of judgment, it's like when they're asking for their rights over you, you can say, well, okay, you know what, I didn't fulfill those rights, but I remembered you in dua. And hopefully that would be the thing that they say, okay, you know what, I'm okay with that. So, we're sorted, sort of thing.
I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, because even sometimes, you might have relatives in another country, and, if it's a country that you don't visit or you don't really have contact with, then it's a bit difficult practically to keep contact with them, or you might have not even been ever introduced to them. I mean, I certainly have relatives who I don't even know exist, probably. So it's nice to think that at least we can remember them in dua, and maybe we don't even know their names, but we could mention that all the relatives that I have a responsibility towards, please God bless them with this, this, and this.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways we can do this. We can do it from a perspective of where we actually pray for them in general, or we can pray for them specifically, especially your uncles and aunts, your dad's brothers and sisters, your mum's brothers and sisters. Even if you've never met them, you would know their names, and you could pray for them specifically. Maybe their children you may not know as well. Remembering them in Salatul Layl, remembering them, after your Salah in dua. Even, I think one of the ways that I used to teach my children, which helps us as well, is when we do the tasbih of Bibi Fatima Zahra alayha salam, when we say the Alhamdulillah, actually saying Alhamdulillah for each of those family members. And that way you're actually making the tasbih much more meaningful. You're being present in the moment and getting a lot more out of that tasbih, as well as you're remembering them in your du'as. So you're helping yourself as well as them, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. SubhanAllah. Like, I feel like when we do these things, we might think that we're doing a favor for someone else, so maybe a favor to our relatives, but actually it's increasing our spirituality and increasing our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I think we forget that. I think the way we have been taught to look at things, especially in the West, it's a very much materialistic, selfish, me, myself, and I way. Islam was never is never about me, myself, and I. If it was, we would be encouraged to go, on top of a mountain and sort of work on our relationship with God. But we're never told to do that. We're constantly told to work on our relationship with others. So even if you look at Hajj, which is probably the greatest journey towards Allah that, most people will go to, it's done amongst the ummah, it's done amongst the people. So it shows that Islam is very much about sort of the ummah and the people and our relatives and our families. And also, I think we don't realize that these are opportunities that are sent by Allah. We forget that. I remember one of the greatest lessons that I learned in our time when we were living in Qom was this idea of when you invite guests, instead of thinking you're doing them a favor by, cooking for them and everything, it's like, they're doing you a favor for coming with and blessing your house. And it was beautiful because that, it's like you actually, when we went to people's houses, it's like they would actually thank us so much for, for coming, because it's like we've blessed their house. And it was such a beautiful lesson to learn, because a lot of the times we think, oh, I've done the cooking and I've done this and I've done that and I've invited them. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, so-and-so has come from abroad, so I have to invite them. Otherwise it'll look bad. Otherwise, they'll go back and they'll complain about us and everything. But if we change our mindset and not do it for others, not do it because it's going to look bad, not do it because they'll go and talk about us, or even making those sort of assumptions, negative assumptions, is really wrong. But actually doing it with the right niyyah, that this is an opportunity sent by Allah for me to serve him through serving his creation, and I should be so thankful for that.
MashaAllah, I wouldn't have thought there is so much behind just one relationship, and especially Silat al-Rahm, I think, is one we sometimes think is just our immediate siblings or parents. We forget that there are, like you say, so many opportunities for us to get blessings with so many more people. Following on from this conversation that we're having about blood relatives, and you did mention inviting them as guests, we have I'm not sure if it's an actual hadith from the Prophet, but it's al-aqrabuna awla bil-ma'ruf. So I think it translates as those who are close get priority in good or any good you do. So the way I've been brought up is that this applies when you're having guests over. For example, let's say you have a majlis in your house. You have to invite your relatives first, and then if there's space, you invite other people. Or like, for example, if you want to recommend someone for marriage, recommend someone from your own family who you know well before recommending others. And, you know, there are so many examples. If you know someone in your family who has a particular skill, advertise their skill to others. So it's like basically supporting your family. And I like the idea of it because it strengthens the ties, it strengthens the bonds. But is there any validity to this hadith?
I haven't actually looked into detail on the hadith, so I can't tell you how authentic it is, but looking at it from a logical perspective and from an Islamic perspective, it makes total sense. From the perspective of that, like I said, all Muslims have a right on us, but the right sort of family, especially blood relatives, this concept of rahm is much more than other Muslims. So it starts off with my immediate family, my parents, my husband and my children, who I have a huge right, you know, who have a huge right over me, and then the rest of my blood relatives who have a greater right on me, and then sort of the extended family, you know, the family who are maybe related but much further relatives and things like that, and then the rest of the Muslim Ummah sort of thing. So it does sort of move outwards, and obviously if they have a right over me, then I have to fulfill their rights before I can fulfill someone else's rights. So even when I'm giving sadaqah, I need to make sure that my family is still sorted before I start giving sadaqah out to others, you know, who may need it. So it's not taking care of others, but if everyone took care of their immediate families, their raham, then inshallah everyone would be sorted. And if there is people who can't take care of them, then obviously then you would, after you've taken care of your immediate families, then you would look outwards to the rest of the Muslim Ummah.
That's really, you know, interesting because, like you say, it makes sense. And if everyone did fulfill the rights, I mean, the whole reason we're doing these podcasts is so that we can all fulfill the rights of all our relationships in the correct way. Because
Inshallah.
if we do, then it will be such a fruitful society because everyone is fulfilling the rights of everyone else and no one is lacking in anything.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the other thing is which we forget is that God put us in certain families for a reason. So it's not just about fulfilling rights, it's actually learning from the people in the families that we've been put into. So nothing is random in this universe. I truly believe everything is planned out exactly for the best situation for us to be in, to reach our potential and therefore our perfection, and therefore walk into paradise on the day of judgment. These are the 3 P's I constantly talk about: potential, perfection, and paradise. And I truly believe that Allah gave us people in our lives for us to learn from and grow from. So it's not just about fulfilling their rights, but also sort of spending time with them to see what I can learn from them. You know, what lessons is Allah trying to teach me in my life to help me reach my potential through allowing me for this person to be in my sort of family circle.
That's such a fresh perspective, because I think sometimes if we have someone who, for whatever reason, we have a difficult relationship with, we'll get fed up and frustrated. Why do I have to deal with them? And, you know, but actually, that's a really good way of looking at it, is actually what is Allah trying to teach me from this relationship? And I think in general, having that perspective on any difficulty you experience in life is really helpful, because, you know, something might appear difficult to you, but actually it's the way you're perceiving it that's making it difficult. If you change your lens and you start to notice all the positives from that relationship, then it first of all will help that relationship, and second of all it will help you grow.
For sure. I think in any life situation you can either look at the positive or look at the negative, and when you look at the negative, then you're just going to go into this negative spiral of self-pity and woe be me and it's not fair and why does it happen to me. Whereas if you look at the positives in any life situation, and there's always positives in every life situation, then there is a chance of growth. And although the difficulty may not go away, it allows you to see why you're going through that difficulty. Therefore it becomes easier for you to sort of be okay with it and actually thrive in it. So whether that situation is directly from God, where you know that God would only put you in a situation when you're ready for the growth, or whether that situation is there because of the free will that God has given mankind. So if someone in your, someone comes to you and says something or does something to you that's quite hurtful, that's not from God. But then God doesn't abandon us. He gives us the tools to be able to even grow from that. So it's a matter of using the tools that God's given me. So in any situation, I sort of look at from the perspective of, where's the growth? Has this come from God? If so, then I'm ready for the growth, and let me, take the tools that I know I have, because God wouldn't have put me in this situation if I wasn't ready for it. Or where's the growth? This isn't from God, but He's given me the tools to be able to grow from it. So let me use the tools that He's given me and grow from it.
Wow. Inshallah, we can all grow in all our relationships.
The question I wanted to ask is, what is the rights and responsibilities of our womb relatives? If you could explain that in more detail for our listeners.
It's literally just fulfilling whatever they need. So ensuring that they have enough food and living thing, whatever. It's like whatever I would want from what I consider as my immediate family, I should want for my rahm, anyone who's related to me. So if I want my children to go to university and I'm, trying hard to do that, then I would want the same for my cousins, their children, things like that. So ensuring whatever I can do in order to be there for them. And I may not have the money to support them too much, or I may not have the time, or I may not have, but it's doing whatever I can, knowing that whatever I do will not only help them, but it'll help me and my family as well. It'll bring lots of blessings into my house, into my household. So literally doing whatever I can. And like we said, it starts off with a dua. And then hopefully that dua will then lead on to some sort of action. And it may just be just picking up the phone and just sort of telling them that, hey, I'm here, I'm remembering you. I hope things are okay. It's something as simple as that even.
Okay, so based on what you just said, is there a need for us to go out of our way to look for relatives or find relatives who we don't know? For example, even if it could be an uncle that's in another country that we have never met, or a cousin, do we need to go out of our way and find them?
I think if you don't know them, then there's obviously been some sort of disagreement within the family, and that's why they've not been in your life. Even if it's not in your life in a physical sense, the fact that you don't know them means that there's been some sort of problem. There's been some sort of qatl rahm. Maybe the brothers had a disagreement, your father and his brothers, or your mom and her brothers or sisters, or whatever it is. So you've not been introduced to them, or you've not been told about them. And I think that's really sad.
Yeah.
So I think I would encourage that. I don't think it's disloyal to your parents, because that's their disagreement with their siblings or whoever it is that but they have a different relationship with you, and it's not disloyal to your parents. If anything, I think by you keeping that silith rahm, you're not perpetuating the sin of your parents, although it may not have been their fault. The fact that it continues. A lot of the times whenever there's a break in family tie, it's always about, oh, whose fault it is, oh, it's not my fault, it's their fault. But because both parties suffer with the bala, then, because it doesn't matter whose fault it is, it's, did you try to make amends? Did you try to sort it? So for example, okay, say I've had an argument, God forbid, with my brother, and I've stopped talking to him, okay, or he stopped talking to me, and it's totally his fault, okay. Say I can leave it at that and sort of say to myself, well, it's not my fault, it's his problem, it's, but I'm losing out on the blessings, and there's bala that comes down on me as well, because I've allowed that family relationship to break up. So what I can do and what I should do is go up to him and say, look, I'm really sorry for, if I said anything that hurt you. And again, that's a sincere sorry. That's a sincere, authentic sorry. It's not, I'm not just saying sorry because I don't mean it, because I think a lot of the times people don't want to apologize because they think, okay, if I apologize, then I'm admitting I'm in the wrong, and I'm not in the wrong. It's how you apologize and what you're apologizing for, one. And two, the other reason why people don't want to apologize is because they say it just makes the other person dig their heels in even more, and they'll become more big-headed, and they'll say, oh, see, I was right, and so they'll continue being who they were and doing what they were doing. That's their journey, not mine. The reason why I'm apologizing is because I'm looking at it from the perspective of, I don't want to have bala on me. I don't want to lose out on the blessings that come from these family ties. So I can go up to him and not say I'm sorry for, what I did or what I said, because I may have said what was right, but I obviously said it in a way that caused him pain. So I can say, I'm sorry that what I said hurt you. I can say, I'm sorry that we've got to a stage where, we're not talking to each other. So can you see that the apology is very much authentic? It's a very sincere apology, because I am sorry for those things.
Yeah.
So I'm not admitting that I'm wrong. I'm not admitting that what I said was wrong. What I'm saying is, I'm really sorry that I caused you pain. I'm really sorry that we've come to a stage where we're not talking to each other. If I choose not to do that, and he chooses not to do that, and we don't talk, and then my children don't know their uncle because I have a problem, we've had a problem, and my children don't talk to them, then the bala just continues. So if my children actually went and talked to them, they're actually doing me a favor, because now the sin is not continuing. It's like you have the concept of when you do thawabu, and it's something that continues, it's thawabu jari. In the same way, there can be sins that continue like that as well. And by you making that connection, I think it's not disloyal, it's actually doing your parents a favor.
That's really interesting, because I think people usually are too scared to connect with those relatives because they don't want to upset their parents.
And I think that's where we need to change the mindset. So it's like having a conversation with your parents in a very respectful way and say, you know what, I can understand, what they did was really upsetting for you, but that's your relationship with them. My relationship with them is totally different. And I need to answer in my grave to my creator about my relationship. They've not done anything to me specifically. So I can't justify doing this. And if I do continue it, I feel like the bala is just going to continue. And I'm really sorry if you can't see that, but I need to do this. It's the same sort of principle, where God says our parents deserve so much respect. It's like every time he mentions, his worship, he talks about parents. It sort of goes hand in hand. But if it means that they're telling me to do something against what God has told me to, then I can't listen to them. So it's like, when we have family weddings where there is haram happening, and your parents are telling you, no, you have to go to keep family ties. No, at that time, I don't, because it's like, I can't go against what God's wishes are. But at the same time, I'll do it very respectfully. And I'll explain to the people who are getting married in the family as well, look, I will come to the nikah at mosque, but I can't come to the reception, or I can't come to this because it's against what I believe is right. And I'm the one who's going to have to answer to God, and I can't justify this. And I'm really sorry if you feel bad about it, but I wish you all the best, and I will pray that, your marriage works out. So it's having those difficult conversations, which I feel we don't, and then we do things, and then it all blows up in our faces because we don't have the difficult conversations with respect.
Yeah, so just continuing on from what you've said about disagreements and cutting family ties, where it becomes a little bit more complicated is if somebody changes their religion, you falling out because of political, business, or, lots of different things that happen. What is the requirement there then? I mean, like if you have children and a close relative has changed their faith, and you're sort of trying to keep hold of your own faith and trying to keep that for your kids.
So again, I think it's important to recognize that they still have a right over you because they're still family. That's the beauty of Islam. The respect that you show to people, it's not respect that has to be earned. It's respect that has been given by God. I remember constantly when my children were growing up, I used to tell them that I don't have to earn your respect. I could be the worst mother in the world, but because I'm your mother, you have to respect me because God's told you to. Now, I'm not justifying being the worst mother in the world. God will, pull me up on that, but that's my journey. You can't use that not to respect me, because otherwise God's going to pull you up on that. So whatever the other person does, that's their journey. I have to make sure that I'm able to answer to God in keeping his laws. And one of his laws is that I have to keep family ties. So I need to make sure that I do that. And a lot of the times what we tend to do as human beings is we condemn the person. It's the action that you condemn, not the person. And if we can make a huge separation between the person and the action, because a lot of the times a person will do an action which is probably a really horrible action or really mean action, and we make that person that action, and that's why then it sort of becomes a big deal. Whereas if we remember that it's just an action and remember all the other good actions that that person did as well in our lives, then I can condemn the action without condemning the person. So if you look at it, okay, from just general relationships with my siblings, with my parents and whoever it is, when they do something, I concentrate on that action so much that action becomes that whole person, and it really becomes a big deal. Whereas if I remember, okay, that's an action which has really upset me, but remember all the other actions that they did which really made me happy, where they showed me so much love, then I can actually talk about that action without getting emotional, without my ego coming into play, and actually explaining to the person why that action upset me so much. So that's one thing, to make sure that I can separate the action from the person. The second thing is also, God, again, has chosen this person in my life for a reason. So I need to think about what lessons I can learn from the choices that they're making in their lives. And that's really important. The third thing that I think you mentioned, which is something that is of concern to most parents, is what about our children? If we allow this person into my child's life, then how do I okay things? Because and you're talking about something as grave as them changing religion. But I think what's more dangerous is when they stay in the religion and openly commit sins. So for example, if you're bringing up your daughter and you're wanting her to wear hijab, and you've got a close family member, be it your sister or your cousin or your aunt, who doesn't wear hijab, that's even more difficult to teach your child, because if they've changed religion, then you can say, you know what, they changed the religion and that's why they're not doing it. But when they're Muslims and they're not doing it, how do you okay that? How do you explain that to your child? And I think, again, it's having those difficult conversations with your children where you're condemning the action, because you have to condemn the action, especially if they're doing it openly, but not condemning the person. So explaining to your child, look, you know what, this is your aunt, this is your cousin, this is your whoever it is. And this action of theirs is wrong because God has said it's wrong. Not because I'm saying it's wrong, but because God has said it's wrong. So we have to make sure that we don't do the same action. And we don't judge this person. God will judge this person. It's their relationship with God, and they have to answer to God. But we can't okay it. And it's having those, and guaranteed your child will go and tell that person that as well. Mummy said, da, 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 da. And you're like, but you know what? Maybe that's what they needed to hear. And maybe that might be the thing that brings them back or makes them realize what they're doing is wrong. You haven't said anything that is wrong. A lot of the times we'll do ghiba, where we actually say things which we shouldn't say, and we're not worried about that going back to the person. But when we say things which are amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, we're worried about that going back to the person. Again, we need to sort out our priorities. We really need to sort out the way we look at things.
That is beautiful, definitely.
You've given us so much to think about, and I'm wondering, what about grandparents? Because we've spoken a lot about uncles, aunts, cousins, but what about grandparents? Are they an extension of parents, or what's their role?
No, for sure. Grandparents have a huge right over us. So it's just like my parents do, my grandparents do as well. So if they're alive, you need to ensure that you fulfill their rights, and if they've passed on, then constantly be remembering them with the Surah Fatiha, or in Salat al-Layl, or with Surah Yasin, or just doing good actions on their behalf is really, really important, because they have a right over us.
Okay, so our podcast is about extended family and in-laws, so I feel like we should speak about in-laws now. So are in-laws part of Salat al-Rahm? Because I don't think you mentioned them.
If you look at it from a fiqh perspective, no, they're not, because like I said, Rahm is relations that come from the womb, so it's blood relatives. So they're not from that perspective, but they do have rights on us from, if you look at it from a different perspective. So we have a hadith, for example, which says that every person has three fathers. One is the father that is their biological father. One is the father that is through marriage. and one is the father that is their teacher. So now if the hadith is actually calling them three fathers, that shows that all of these people have a right over us. So it's not even just our in-laws, but our teachers as well. And you know, just thinking back at how many teachers have I given rights over, and how many teachers have I upset, and you know, it's like all of these things are really, really important. The other thing is as well, as I said, Muslims have a right over us. So whether they're related through our in-laws or whether they're just not related at all, every Muslim has a right over another Muslim. So it's important to recognize that. But obviously with the in-laws, the right becomes greater because they may not be my parents, but they're my husband's parents. So I need to make sure that my husband keeps that silith rahm. So I don't have to. If you look at it from a very fiqhi perspective, I'm not even going into akhlaq at the moment. I'm looking at it very, very fiqhi, okay? The difference between fiqh and akhlaq is where it's wajib and haram. Akhlaq is where I'm doing more in order to reach my potential, in order to get closer to Allah. As I move on my spiritual journey towards Allah, my akhlaq gets better. Akhlaq is to do with any relationship, whether it's my relationship with God, whether it's my relationship with others, whether it's my relationship with the environment. It's me doing extra above the wajib and haram. But let's not look at the akhlaq. Let's look at the fiqh just for the minute, right? So, okay, my parents-in-laws are not my parents. So there is no silith raham there. I can say, I don't want to go to their house. I don't want to invite them home. I don't want to have anything more to do with them than I would with any other Muslim. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're a Muslim. So they have rights, but that's how I'm going to take it. But I have to remember that they are my husband's parents. So he needs to invite them home. He needs to go and see them. He needs to spend time with them. They're my children's grandparents. So they need to invite them home. They need to spend time with them. They need to. If I, through my actions, I'm stopping my husband or my children from fulfilling those rights, then I will be held liable for that. The other thing is as well, looking at it from the other perspective, it's the concept of amr bil ma'ruf and nahy munkar. So if I am not encouraging him to spend time with them, then I'm not doing the amr bil ma'ruf. It's like if he's, you know, if he wants to spend time, if he wants to invite them, then I should be encouraging the goodness, because that's part of amr bil ma'ruf. This is a wajib on him, which I have to encourage. And if he's breaking family ties, if he's not having anything to do with them, then I have to discourage that and make sure that that's not happening. And recognize that just like my mother's du'as are so powerful for me, his mother's du'as are so powerful for him. And whatever affects me will affect my husband and my children. Whatever affects him will affect me and his children, sort of thing. So even when you look at it from a fiqh perspective, although directly there is nothing that says, I have to do this, 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 in a way, I really do have to do this, 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 because of the amr bil ma'ruf, because of the nahy munkar, because I want the blessings, because I don't want my husband's life to be shortened and for us to suffer because the risk has gone down, because his du'as are not being, do you see, it's all a domino effect. I can't separate myself from my in-laws just because the fiqh doesn't have anything specific there.
I think you've highlighted such an important point there, because in conversations, I have heard it said that they're not my parents. I don't have a duty towards them. And just that way of thinking is so detrimental to the relationship. And I think it also affects your husband's relationship. And I mean, some people will keep a relationship with their in-laws, but they will, but badmouth them in front of their own children. So then your children get the wrong perspective or wrong perception of who their grandparents are, for example, or who their uncles and aunts are. So it's really nice for you to be explaining that even within the fiqhi perspective, there are still rights upon them, even though they do not fall under this category of salat raham.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because again, if you're saying anything bad about them, which is ruining their relationship, so like if it's ruining my relationship with their grandparents, then I've committed a gunnah. I've done something that is haram. So it's important. If I say something to my husband, if I'm constantly complaining about his parents, it's gonna affect his relationship with them. And again, that is wrong, because then I'm cutting those family ties between my husband and his parents. So it's important to recognize that, from a fiqhi perspective, I still need to make sure that I maintain those relationships. And secondly, there are hadiths, like I said, the fact that there is, three fathers. So, my father-in-law comes into being my father from that hadith. and also the right that's given to a father-in-law. So for example, God forbid, if my husband divorced me, or if I divorced my husband, I would have to wear hijab in front of my husband every time I saw him after that. But I would never have to wear hijab in front of my father-in-law. He would always remain my father. So again, showing the right of him as my father, even though me and my husband have split up now, he still remains my father. I will never be able to marry him. I will never have to wear hijab in front of him. So again, these things which may not be directly wajib and haram actually show us the importance of it when you look into it in depth. And I think the final thing I'd like to say is, when do we ever live just according to fiqh? If I lived my marriage according to fiqh, then I could just literally sit here with my feet up and not cook, not clean, not look after my children, not do anything. And the only requirement, the only wajibat on me is to be physically available for my husband. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to chill the rest of the time. Let him go out to work. Let him, it's like, I'm not going to, how is that relationship going to work? It's like, obviously there's an akhlaqi aspect of it. I will take care of my children. I will cook for my family. I will clean. I will do all of these things out of love, because that's how the relationship will work. It's not about just sticking to the fiqh. The fiqh is the minimum, that is the requirement, because it has to be, because the fiqh has to be for the weakest of the Muslim to be able to do. That's God's justice. So it's the minimum, but we shouldn't be content with the minimum. It's like when we tell our children, don't just aim for the 50%, because if you mess up, then you're going to fail. And again, if we're just aiming for wajib and haram, guaranteed we're going to mess up. And then where will we end up? Why not aim for the 100%? And then, you know what, we're not going to get the 100%, but at least I'll get maybe 60, 70, and that will ensure that I end up in paradise, inshallah.
Can I just ask, does it go the other way around as well? Like, does the husband maintain relations with his in-laws? And, is he meant to be encouraging his wife to spend time with her family, etc.?
Of course, it works exactly the same way, because again, my relationship with my parents is important, and they have rights over me. My children's relationship with their grandparents so it's exactly the same for the husband as it is for the wife. The problem is, again, culture takes over. And, with the different cultures comes all these different expectations. It's like, no, they become your parents, but not my parents. And we can live with the boys' parents, but we can't live with the girls' parents. It's like, where in Islam does it say this? It's like, if my parents or his parents want to help out, if we choose to live with his parents or with my parents, it really makes no difference. They're all, one is my parents and one is his parents. One I have rights, that I have to fulfill, and one he has rights that he has to fulfill. Again, the children both are grandparents, equal grandparents. It's not one is above the other as grandparents. I feel like a lot of the times we allow culture to dictate to us rather than religion, and so much so that we don't even know what part is religion and what part is culture, and that's quite dangerous. I think there is a lot of good in culture. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the culture, but I think it's one, knowing exactly what is culture and what is religion is really, really important, and taking the good from the culture and maybe being okay with leaving behind the bad. And for sure, when it goes against Islam, I have to push it aside.
So, how you spoke about living with in-laws? This is a big, kind of contentious issue that's discussed. We know culturally there are different views on this, but what is the Islamic view on living with in-laws?
There isn't anything that says that you should or you shouldn't. I think there is that recognition that a woman wants to have her own house, and it's important to be, for the man to be the master of his house and the woman. But again, I think all of these things should be discussed before marriage. When you get together, it's like, for you to discuss it. If it's something that you really feel that you cannot live with in-laws, or you really don't want to, or you feel like, I want to have my own house, then have that conversation with your husband. And if he turns around and says, yes, he will give it to you, then actually know what the parameters of that is like, am I going to get it in a year? Am I going to get it in 5 years? Am I going to get it in 10 years? Or is it something we'll discuss in a year, or discuss in 5 years? Something. You've got to realize what's important to you and how much you're okay with. Again, there is a lot of positives and negatives in any situation. If you live on your own, then obviously you have the freedom to cook, not cook, clean, not clean, get takeaway, roam around in whatever clothes you want to wear. There's a lot of more freedom. When you're living with in-laws, there may be a lot less freedom in that perspective, but then there's a lot of freedom in, like, they can babysit the children, and you can go out and, you know, date nights. You can, you don't have to cook every single day. Maybe your mother-in-law cooks one day, you cook one day. There's, you know, there's a lot of growth for yourself and for your children as well, being in extended families as well. So whatever you choose, I don't think there's any right or wrong. Islam doesn't say it has to be this way or that way. Generally, cultures do. And again, I think we shouldn't be forced by culture to do things a specific way. We should have those conversations, but at the same time, taking into account that we may have had a conversation before marriage, and this is how, you know, you'd said we were going to move out, but circumstances change. Again, we plan, and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. So if I remind myself that constantly, that, you know what, he said that, and he was trying to do that, but this thing happened, and now you know, we can't afford to move out and everything. And instead of blaming my husband, actually look at it from the perspective of, maybe Allah's planned this for, you know, there's something greater. There's some sort of growth in here. There's something that Allah wants me to learn from this, is really, really important. And again, I think one of the advice that I would give people, which I feel really works, is live with your in-laws at the beginning, so that you build a relationship with them, so that later on, if you need to take care of them, you know, if they need you in any way, there's already that relationship formed, one. Secondly, it teaches you a little bit about the way that their family, you know, that your husband's family works. Thirdly, it gives that breathing space for you as a couple to sort of just not worry about financial perspectives and things like that. You can actually save up and things. And fourthly, I feel like, you know, when the marriage is all done and dusted and reality kicks in, it's really difficult. And there may be a lot of discussions between you and your husband, which may be avoided when you're living with other people, because you can't have these discussions openly. And then by the time you get to the bedroom, you think, it really is not that big a deal. Let's put it aside, sort of thing. So there's a lot of things that there are lots of positives that come out of it as well. And I'm saying living with the husband because that's what's culturally accepted by all. But there wouldn't be anything wrong with if you decided to live with the girl's side of the, you know, with the on the wife's side parents, because it works out, because they're here, and, you know, this is the country you want to live in, or whatever. It really doesn't make any difference.
I mean, like you said, there isn't a clear Islamic right or wrong with this issue. So I guess whatever works for the couple. Some couples might prefer to have that independence, learn to build their lives together from the beginning, and some couples might prefer to, you know, get to know their in-laws a bit better, or get that financial support. So
yeah, for sure. I think it is very individual, and it's important to recognize that. And there's no right or wrong, but at the same time, I think making these decisions, having these conversations with your parents, and him having them with his parents, so everyone knows what's happening, is really, really important. I think that's, you know, a lot of the times I think conversations happen between husband and wife, but then the parents aren't aware of those conversations. And then, you know, when decisions are made, obviously the parents will never blame their own children. It must be the person who's come into my child's life, who's changed them and who's made them think like this. My child would never think like that. And it's really sad, because it may be your child that actually wanted that. So, you know, having those conversations with your parents and keeping them in the loop is really, really important.
And it also strengthens your relationship with your parents, because they're seeing you grow. I mean, when you get married, you grow. As mature as you think you might have been, you grow because you're learning to live with this other person. You're having to make very difficult decisions about your life together. So I think it probably, when you're having those conversations, even if they might be a bit difficult with your parents sometimes, I'm sure your parents would really appreciate them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, like you're saying, you know, if they can see that you're being mature about it, and it's something you've thought about, I'm sure they'd be okay with it. It's when we make haste decisions, and when we leave our parents out of the loop, that's where then they feel like, oh, they didn't think it through, or, you know, if they talk to me, or, you know, I could have explained it to them, sort of thing. So this way, it's like you've actually shown them, look, we've thought it through, we've talked about it, and this is what we've come up with. And as a parent, even if I think that my kids are making the wrong decision, as long as it's not haram, you know what? They'll learn from that wrong decision, and that's their right to make that wrong decision. It's that's where the growth is. A lot of the times, growth is from the wrong decisions that we make in our lives.
Absolutely. The thing is, when we talk about it in real life, there are strong cultural tendencies. And for example, there are cultures that will say, when you get married, you are part of the husband's family. And if your husband wants to, make you spend all your time with his family, and limit your time with your families, and give you no permission to actually visit your family, things like this happen. So I've seen cases where the husband gives the girl, how he has to give her permission to leave the house. So he tells her, you're not allowed to see your family. So she'll go for, let's say, weeks without seeing her family. And you can just imagine the amount of distress that this would cause to a young girl who's just married and learning to live with a family who are completely different to hers. So what is the Islamic right of your family over your in-laws? Like, can your husband actually do that? Can he say, you're not allowed to see your family for a period of time, or no?
Islamically, no, he can't. But if he does do that, two wrongs don't make a right. So, for example, if he denies me the right to go out of my house to see my family, that's wrong, and he will be held accountable for that. But if I go against him and go out of my house to go and see my family, I've done wrong as well, and I will be held accountable for that. So that concept of two wrongs don't make a right, we need to understand that. It's important for us to realize that if one person, it's like when your kids are arguing and fighting, and one hits the other one, and they come crying to you, and it's like, he hit me first, that's why I hit him. And as a parent, you always tell them, well, that doesn't make it right. It's exactly the same as adults. Just because one person's doing something wrong doesn't make it right for you to do something wrong as well. And it's understanding that. And a lot of the times when we make decisions, we forget that God is in the picture as well. So even if he's doing something wrong, God hasn't abandoned me. God hasn't abandoned my parents. So a lot of the times I'll be like, okay, let's take it from a parent's perspective, okay? When we bring up our children, a lot of parents have this intention that I'm bringing up my child so that if I bring them up properly and if I take care of them and everything, they'll take care of me in old age. My niyyah is for that child. My niyyah is for my own selfish needs. My niyyah is not for Allah. I should be bringing up my child because God's told me to bring up my child in the best possible way, that he becomes the Ansar of the Mahdi, inshallah. That should be my niyyah. Now, if I've done it properly, then my child will take care of me because they will have been taught what the rights of a parent is. But my expectation is not for them to take care of me, because my expectation is for God to take care of me. And inshallah, my child will, because I've brought them up the right way. If my child doesn't take care of me, honestly, as a parent, I would not be upset that they've abandoned me, because I know God will send someone else. What would upset me is that my child lost out on that opportunity of serving his mother. And I would be like so sad that I wasn't able to teach my child the importance of parents. That's what would upset me. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So I'm not sitting there trying to look at my old age and thinking about, I need to take care, I need to make sure that I bring my children up so that they take care of me. Because just like God didn't abandon me when I was a baby, God's not going to abandon me in old age. God's always in the picture. So even if I'm not able to take care of my parents, God will take care of them through someone else. Even if my husband is doing something wrong, God is watching, and God will make sure that he compensates me for the hurt that he's caused, my husband's caused me in this world as well as the hereafter. It's remembering that I'm not on my own. I don't have to do something against God, because that's what I'm doing then, is I'm actually pushing God out of the picture and trying to take control. And when I take control, it will always mess up. Whereas when I sort of actually sit there and pray to God and say, you know what, I know you're there, I know you're going to take care of it, and I know that you're going to, make sure that this works out in whichever way there is growth. And sometimes I can't see the growth, but there is. And sometimes actually having those conversations with God, hang on a minute, I really can't see the growth. Please show me where the growth is, because I'm having a real problem with this. And it's actually having those conversations with God where you're talking to him, where you're complaining to him, because he's the only one that you really can complain to. And it's not Giba when you complain to him, because he already knows it all. And actually asking him for solutions, and realizing that he's always there. He won't abandon you, even when everyone else is doing things which are so wrong. He's there, and even if it's not sorted, he's given me the tools to be able to handle it, and he will compensate me in this world and the hereafter.
SubhanAllah, our lives would be so much easier if we just really stuck to it and realized that God is in the picture. We talk about tawakkul and we talk about relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in these, in these examples of these simple relationships that don't need to be overcomplicated, if we put Allah in the picture, if we have our intention for the sake of Allah, but then we do complicate them, don't we? Like, in the beginning you were saying we concentrate on the action. I mean, we do that. They treated me like this when I got married. They didn't welcome me properly. They made me feel like this. But yeah, it's really sad. So inshallah, this is a beautiful reminder from yourself. Inshallah. Let's say your husband is nice and he's fine and he doesn't stop you from, inshallah, he doesn't stop you from seeing your family. Realistically, how do you balance your family when you've got this new family as well, your in-laws?
I think it's when everyone comes together, and it's important for us all to come together. And again, it's very much on your niyyah as a parent, how you have brought your children up, because if you've brought them up with the wrong niyyah, then you'll find it a lot more difficult to step back. If you've brought your child up with God in the picture, then you'll find it a lot easier to step back, because yes, my whole life revolved around my children, but because that's what God wanted at that time. Now my children have gone, I still have a purpose. I'm still the servant of Allah. I'm still the slave of Allah, and He will send me something else that He expects for me to do. And my life doesn't just stop because my children have moved on. And because my life doesn't stop, because it's like you're doing other things, then you don't feel like there's a void in your life. A lot of the times I think parents feel like there's a huge hole in their life once their children move away, and it's sort of realizing that at that moment my duty was as a mother, and my duty will continue as a mother, because I don't think you ever stop being a mother, but my focus may be something else now that my children have moved on onto the next stage of their journey, and I need to look at what my next stage of my journey is, and God will send opportunities for us to grow and move closer to Him. So I think that's really important. And if I can do it from that perspective, then I as a parent will actually tell my child, you know what, don't worry, if you're ever put in a situation, and I remember having this conversation with my daughter, if you're ever put in a situation where your mother-in-law tells you something and I tell you something and it's exactly opposite, and it's so for example, she needs you to take her somewhere and I need you to take her somewhere, and it's at the exact same time, do it for her, not for me, because I as a mother will forgive you because you're my child. She may find it a little bit more difficult. So just explain to me, you know what, Mum, remember you told me this? Because when you're not emotional, you can say these things. Yeah. When you're emotional, it's really difficult. So if you've said these things, then your child reminds you of it, then you're like, okay, now I really have to do it. and it's a really good reminder. And you sort of step back and you think, okay, I have to, because you know what, I did tell her I'd be okay with it, and I need to be okay with it. So it's again, maybe putting into place certain things which will allow us to act in the right way, the way that God would want us to act, because sometimes we just need that reminder. And when we're emotional, especially when we're emotional, we need that reminder. So sometimes it's having those conversations. Like I keep telling my children, when I become old and if I become really selfish and if I don't listen and if I start, doing things, like not sort of working towards my goal as God and feeling bad about little things and things like that, just remind me, Mum, you told me to remind you about this, because we do get set in our ways, or we do things in certain ways, and it's the older you get, the more difficult it is for us to change and then continue the growth and things like that. So it's while I'm getting old, but while I'm not that old, it's that reminder. It's like, as you get older, you get more pain and things like that. So again, it's like I tell my children, if I, when I get old, if I'm constantly complaining, remind me, you know what, Mum, you said you didn't want to complain to others, so you said you were going to complain to God. So I'm just reminding you, you told me this. Because at this moment I can say that, but when I'm in that situation where I'm in a lot of pain, it's really difficult not to complain to others. So again, it's that reminder that these were my words and they're telling me my words back again, and hopefully then I'll be able to do it in the right way.
I think that is so, it's so beautiful to be able to think of yourself that even you are going to one day maybe deteriorate, and you may need that reminder from your children who you worked so hard on, and they're going to, you know, in your lifetime, give that sadaqah jariyah back to you. I love it. I really, really love that.
I always say that, you know, we think we've been given our children to teach them, but honestly, we can learn so much from our children as well. They've been specially handpicked for us to learn from as well.
Oh, subhanallah. Do you have any last thoughts on these two relationships, the extended family, the in-laws? What should we take away today?
I think if the only thing you take away is to remind yourself that there is no randomness in his universe. There are certain people that God has chosen to be in your family. There's a reason they're in your family. And whatever you find irritating about them, guaranteed there's something in you. That's why you've picked on that specific thing to find irritating. And there's something within you that you need to change, rather than looking at them, because we can't change anyone else. We can only change ourselves. So let me look within myself and see what needs to change within me so that I can truly become the slave of Allah. It's like, it's that constant reminder. When I go back to him, if my family can actually put on my gravestone, here lies the slave of Allah, and put it authentically and sincerely on my gravestone without putting it because I told them to put it, then I know I led a life which served the purpose that it was supposed to. I reached my potential and my perfection, and will walk into paradise with no problem, inshallah.
Ilahi Ameen, inshallah. Aalimah Masuma, it's been wonderful to speak to you today, but unfortunately we've come to the end of today's episode. We'd like to thank you so much for making time to discuss this topic with us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was amazing to have this conversation. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Feel free to leave us a comment on our social media handles, and to find out more, please visit our website, thegoodtree.faith.
Till next week, fi amanillah.
Join us next week as we discuss our relationship with the elderly with Sheikh Nurul Muhammad.